A lot of people who start studying a language, maybe it's self-study, maybe you are taking a class, who knows, but a lot of people who start studying a language, a common problem that they face is they don't have anyone to speak with and they don't get enough speaking practice. That's a common issue, especially if you're learning a more rare language or if you're maybe a little more introverted. There's just no one to talk to, and it's really hard to develop those patterns of producing the language, using the right grammar, using the right wording in a concise way if you are not practicing speaking enough. So what I would highly recommend you do, if this sounds like you, is just start talking to yourself constantly. You might think you're kind of going crazy if you're just constantly looking in the mirror, speaking your secondary language, not fluently. If you live with other people, they might hear you doing it. You can maybe whisper it to yourself. But just practice on making output, using the language to create sentences, and virtually all the ideas that you think in your head, just instead of thinking in your native language, try your best to just express those things in the secondary language. When I was learning Chinese in the earlier stages, and when I was learning Japanese also, which I got to like an intermediate level, not as good as my Chinese, but I can still speak it quite all right, and I understand a good amount. But when I was in my early years of college, I still remember living in the dorms, and at that time I was taking both classes, Japanese and Chinese class. And I just remember just doing routine tasks. Maybe I was cleaning some dishes, or maybe I was about to go take a shower, grabbing all the toiletries I needed to take to the bathroom, and I would just say stuff in the second language. I would just repeat it to myself, just go through my brain what I'm thinking. I would say stuff like basic stuff, just, oh, I am getting tired. I am going to get ready for bed now. First, I need to take a shower. I need to also brush my teeth. Just saying this kind of self-dialogue using the secondary language. That's really how you can start to develop these speaking patterns, develop these, I guess, circuits in your brain to be able to produce the language. Because if you're just looking at text on a document, it's all input, but you never output, it's never going to get really ingrained within your brain how it should. It's going to be more of a passive type of thing, which you can learn that way. You can learn to read, you can learn to listen, but you'll never be able to do output at a level. And a lot of people, they say speak a language. They don't necessarily say understand, because the goal should be to be able to speak the language, to be able to make output as good as you possibly can. So that's a big thing I would recommend you do. And people sometimes ask me when they find out I speak more than one language, because being in the US, that's a little more uncommon than in some other countries, but we have a lot of bilingual people. But regardless, some monolingual people will ask me, do you ever think in Chinese? And it kind of becomes a blurry thing, because I've been doing this tactic of speaking to myself a lot that it kind of becomes unconscious at times. And it's kind of like a mixture. I'll really be just thinking in English, and then suddenly certain things in my brain, I realize, oh, I was just thinking in Chinese. I was just talking to myself in Chinese, because it's become so second nature. And when it gets to that point, your language ability has already started to take off. Because whatever you do, if you're always trying to narrate in Chinese, when you encounter a situation you don't know the right words to use, you don't know what words to use in that situation, then you're going to think, what is that word? And it's the 21st century. We all have smartphones. Pull it out of your pocket and search how to say, if I don't know the word for fence, because I see a fence behind me. If I don't know the word for fence in a language, and I'm trying to say it when I'm doing my self-narration, like, why is there a fence here? I might think that in English in my head. When I'm trying to narrate in Chinese, I might think, why is there a realize I don't know the word for fence, and then I go and look it up. And if your brain is just constantly in this kind of on the ball mode of trying to use the language as much as possible and trying to generate sentences yourself, if you're just constantly doing that, eventually you're going to get to the point where language just flows from your brain without you thinking about it too much. And at that point, you really start to be fluent because you're not doing sentence by sentence translation. Your reaction time is quicker. As a result of it just being so ingrained in your brain, you don't have as many questions about listening comprehension because you're able to produce it yourself at that point. You don't need to think about the listening aspect of it as much because you're outputting. You don't even need to focus on input. So all in all, I would highly recommend, as much as possible, you start to speak to yourself. You might seem like you're going crazy, but just try to start speaking to yourself as much as possible in your target language to ingrain it in your brain and become a better speaker.